Muscular, wealthy, so needed a donor, but froze when the only match was his divorced wife he dumped years ago. The world tilted sideways. His knees buckled. The last thing he heard before hitting the stage floor was 2,000 people gasping in unison. Have you ever held someone's fate in your hands? Hi viewers, kindly tell us where you're watching from and what time it is. Warm welcome to the family. Enjoy the story. The Forbes stage lights dimmed as Blake Morrison collapsed mid-sentence, his billion-dollar empire crashing down with him. But the real shock came when doctors told him only one person in America could save his life. The name on the donor registry made his heart stop faster than kidney failure ever could. Arielle Brooks, the wife he destroyed 10 years ago. She wasn't coming to save him. She was coming to watch him beg. What do you do when the person you need most is the person you hurt worst? Have you ever had to face someone you wronged when you were desperate? Have you watched someone who broke you suddenly need you to survive? Maybe it happened in your family, your workplace, or your community. That moment when power shifts completely and the person who once controlled everything suddenly has nothing. This is about more than medical miracles. It's about whether some betrayals are too deep to heal. Can a woman who rebuilt herself from ashes find mercy for the man who lit the match? Can a powerful CEO learn humility when his life literally depends on forgiveness? If you think you know how this ends, think again. Because when life and death meet, love and revenge, nothing goes according to plan. Stay with me as we discover whether redemption is possible when your survival depends on someone else's grace. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever held someone's fate in your hands? What did you do with that power? Follow along as we uncover a story that's been buried for decades, where Austin's richest man learns that some debts can't be paid with money. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. That moment when success meant nothing and the past came calling with a price tag he couldn't afford. He built an empire on other people's dreams, until the day his body reminded him that some things can't be bought, controlled, or conquered. Blake Morrison stood behind the Forbes keynote podium, his custom-tailored suit perfectly pressed, his confidence bulletproof. 2,000 investors hung on his every word about the future of artificial intelligence. His company, Morrison Tech, had just hit a market cap of $12 billion. He was 42, untouchable, and absolutely certain the world revolved around his brilliance. The first sign something was wrong came when his vision blurred. The teleprompter words swam together like alphabet soup. His carefully rehearsed speech about disrupting traditional boundaries died in his throat as pain shot through his lower back like lightning. Technology doesn't wait for permission, he managed to say, gripping the podium. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the air conditioning. It takes what it wants, and the world tilted sideways. His knees buckled. The last thing he heard before hitting the stage floor was 2,000 people gasping in unison. The Austin Medical Center's VIP wing gleamed with marble floors and crystal chandeliers, but the machines monitoring Blake's failing kidneys hummed with mechanical indifference to his wealth. Private rooms with panoramic city views couldn't change the numbers on his blood work. His assistant, David, paced between the door and window like a caged animal, fielding calls from board members who smelled weakness. "Sir, the market opened down 18%, David whispered, scrolling through his tablet. "Investors are nervous about your health status." Blake stared at the ceiling tiles, each one looking like a gravestone. His mouth tasted like copper and defeat. The woman in his bed at home, Madison, 26, Instagram famous for her workout videos, had sent exactly one text. "Hope you feel better, babe. At Coachella with the girls." She was probably already planning her exit strategy. Blake had trained women well over the years. They stayed for the lifestyle, not the man. When the lifestyle looked shaky, they vanished like morning fog. Dr. Patricia Chun entered with the kind of professional calm that meant terrible news. Her lab coat was pristine white, her expression carefully neutral. She delivered death sentences to billionaires before. "Mr. Morrison, your kidney function is at 8%. Without immediate intervention, you're looking at complete failure within weeks." She consulted her tablet. "We need to discuss transplant options." Blake's laugh came out hollow and bitter. Money talks, document. How much for the best kidneys money can buy? It doesn't work that way. We've run your profile through the National Donor Registry. Dr. Chin's fingers moved across her screen. There's good news and complicated news. Give me the good news first. We found a perfect match. Tissue compatibility is remarkable, like you were made for each other. Blake felt hope flood his chest for the first time in days. And the complicated news? The nephrologist's words cut through his relief like surgical steel. Mr. Morrison, your perfect match is Ariel Brooks, your ex-wife. The name hit him like a physical blow. The room started spinning again, but this time it wasn't kidney failure. Some names from your past whisper. Others scream with the weight of every wrong you've done. Blake's hands shook as he gripped the hospital bed rails. That's impossible. Run it again. Dr. Chin's expression didn't change. We've confirmed it twice. Ariel Brooks, age 38, Atlanta, Georgia. The genetic markers are a perfect match. It's actually quite rare. The odds are roughly 1 in 100,000. The irony tasted like poison in his mouth. The woman whose heart he'd shattered was the only person who could restart his. The wife he'd abandoned after their miscarriage, the one he blamed for holding him back from his dreams, now held his life in her hands. She won't do it, Blake whispered, more to himself than to Dr. Chun. She hates me. She has every right to hate me. David looked up from his phone, confusion written across his face. Boss, who is Ariel Brooks? I don't have her in any of your contact files. Blake closed his eyes, and suddenly he was 28 again, standing in a Texas courthouse, watching his wife sign divorce papers with tears streaming down her face. He'd felt relief that day, not guilt. Relief that he could finally pursue his ambitions without emotional baggage. Relief that he could start fresh with someone who wouldn't remind him of lost babies and broken dreams. She's the biggest mistake I ever made, Blake said quietly. And I don't mean marrying her. I mean losing her. The hospital room's silence stretched like a courtroom before a verdict, broken only by the steady beep of monitors counting down his remaining heartbeats. Dr. Chun cleared her throat professionally. Mr. Morrison, we need to contact her through proper channels. The transplant coordinator will reach out, but you should know, donor consent is entirely voluntary. She has no legal obligation to help you. Blake's phone buzzed. A text from Madison. Babe, TMZ is calling about your collapse. Should I give a statement? Maybe something about how strong and brave you are? Could be good for my brand too. He turned the phone face down without responding. The contrast was stark. Madison saw his crisis as a photo opportunity, while Ariel, God, he hadn't thought about Ariel in years. Not really. Sure, he'd wondered sometimes what happened to her, especially on the anniversary of their baby's due date, but he'd pushed those thoughts away like everything else that made him uncomfortable. Sir, David was staring at him with concern. Should I have legal research Mrs. Brooks? Maybe there's some angle we can work, some leverage. No. Blake's voice came out sharper than he intended. Absolutely not. We don't threaten her. We don't manipulate her. We don't even breathe in her direction unless she agrees to see me. David blinked in surprise. In 10 years of working for Blake Morrison, he'd never heard his boss pass up an opportunity for leverage. His assistant's research file trembled in his hands 3 hours later. Ariel Brooks, licensed therapist, Atlanta, Georgia, specializing in trauma recovery for women of color. Divorced. No children. The last line hit like a physical blow. She had never remarried, never had the family he'd stolen from her. And now she was his only hope. She built her throne from the ashes of his betrayal, and now the king was coming to kneel. Ariel Brooks adjusted her silk blouse and checked her reflection in the office window. At 38, she'd grown into the kind of beauty that commanded respect before demanding attention. Her practice overlooked Piedmont Park, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the city she'd conquered one healed heart at a time, including her own. The morning had been typical. 3 therapy sessions with women rebuilding their lives after devastating betrayals. A mother of 2 escaping an abusive marriage. A college student learning to set boundaries with toxic family members. A CEO recovering from workplace harassment. Each story reminded Ariel why she'd chosen this work, why she turned her own pain into purpose. Her assistant, Maya, knocked softly on the door. "Dr. Brooks? There's a call from Austin Medical Center. They say it's urgent." Ariel's stomach clenched involuntarily. She had no family in Austin anymore. No reason anyone from Texas would call. Unless, transfer it to my office. The transplant coordinator's voice was professionally neutral. "Dr. Brooks, I'm calling regarding a patient who needs a kidney transplant. Our records show you're registered as an organ donor, and you've come up as a compatible match." Ariel sat down slowly, her training kicking in. "Stay calm. Process information. Don't react emotionally. What's the patient's name?" "Blake Morrison. He's in critical condition and..." The phone nearly slipped from her hand. 10 years collapsed into a single heartbeat. Blake Morrison, the man who'd promised to love her forever, then walked away when forever got complicated. The husband who'd blamed her for their miscarriage, as if grief was her fault alone. The CEO who traded her in for a younger model the moment his company started making real money. "Dr. Brooks, are you still there?" Ariel's training as a therapist had taught her to recognize trigger responses, to breathe through emotional flashbacks, to separate past trauma from present reality. But knowing the techniques and applying them were different things entirely. "I'm here," she said, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. "Tell me about his condition." As the coordinator explained Blake's kidney failure, Ariel found herself staring at a framed photo on her desk. Her with her therapy group for divorced women, all of them laughing at some joke she couldn't remember. These women had taught her that healing wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about deciding what power to give it over your future. "Dr. Brooks, we understand this is a significant decision. Would you be willing to meet with Mr. Morrison to discuss the possibility?" The old Ariel would have hung up immediately. The broken woman who'd left Austin with nothing but a suitcase and a shattered heart would have said no without hesitation. But the woman she'd become, the therapist who specialized in helping women reclaim their power, the entrepreneur who'd built a successful practice from scratch, the survivor who'd learned that forgiveness was about freedom, not weakness, she had a different response. The hospital's call came during her lunch break, but she didn't hang up in shock. She smiled with the dangerous grace of a woman who'd been waiting 10 years for this moment. "Tell Mr. Morrison," she said slowly, "that I'll see him, but not to donate." 10 years collapsed into seconds as she walked through that hospital door. Not as the broken woman he'd left, but as the force of nature he'd created through his cruelty. Blake had rehearsed this moment in his head for 3 days straight. What he would say, how he would apologize, the exact words that might convince her to save his life. But when Ariel Brooks walked into his private hospital room, every prepared speech died in his throat. She entered like a storm dressed in designer clothes. A burgundy silk blouse that made her dark skin glow, black slacks that hugged her curves, heels that announced her arrival like a countdown to judgment. This wasn't the 28-year-old woman he'd left crying in a courthouse. This was someone entirely new, someone who moved through the world like she owned it. "You look good, Blake." Her voice carried honey and venom in equal measure. "Dying suits you." He tried to sit up straighter in the hospital bed, suddenly aware of how weak he must appear. The machines surrounding him beeped their mechanical rhythm, marking time like a funeral dirge. "Ariel, Dr. Brooks," she corrected, settling into the visitor's chair with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to being in control. "You can call me Dr. Brooks." The power dynamic was crystal clear. She sat while he lay helpless. She was healthy while he was dying. She had choices while he had desperation. "Dr. Brooks," he began again, tasting the formality like medicine. "Thank you for coming. Don't thank me yet. I haven't agreed to anything." She crossed her legs and studied him with the clinical attention of a therapist evaluating a patient. "You look older. 10 years will do that." He attempted a smile. "You look incredible." "I know. No false modesty, no deflection. Just simple acknowledgement of truth. I didn't come here for compliments, Blake. I came to see what you've become." The silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of everything unsaid. He could smell her perfume. Not the same scent from their marriage, but something richer, more complex. Everything about her radiated confidence and success. "I heard about your company," she continued. $12 billion. Congratulations. I assume that means the sacrifices were worth it. The word sacrifices hit like a slap. They both knew what she meant. Their marriage, their unborn child, her dreams that he'd convinced her to put on hold for his career. "Ariel, Dr. Brooks, I know you have every reason to hate me." "Hate is too simple," she replied, studying her manicured nails. "Hate implies you still have power over my emotions. What I feel for you is much more complicated than that." Blake's heart monitor picked up speed, whether from fear or the undeniable pull he still felt toward her. He couldn't tell. She leaned close enough that he could smell her perfume, different from their wedding night, but equally intoxicating, and whispered, "I'm not here to save your life, Blake. I'm here to see if you remember how to value one." The challenge in her eyes promised that this conversation was just beginning. She offered him something more terrifying than death, the chance to face the truth about who he'd become. Ariel stood and walked to the window, her silhouette framed against the Austin skyline. Blake's eyes followed the curve of her waist, the confident set of her shoulders. Even facing away from him, she commanded the room's attention. "Do you know what I do for a living, Blake?" The coordinator said you're a therapist. She turned, a slight smile playing at her lips. "I specialize in helping women recover from emotional trauma. Specifically, women who've been abandoned, manipulated, or discarded by powerful men who thought their success mattered more than other people's hearts." Blake felt his mouth go dry. "Ariel, Dr. Brooks," she corrected again. "And I'm very good at my job. Want to know why?" He nodded, though he suspected he didn't really want to hear the answer. "Because I understand the psychology of men like you. Men who take what they want and leave destruction in their wake. Men who convince themselves that their ambition justifies their cruelty." She moved closer to his bed, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Men who only learn empathy when they're the ones who need saving. Blake's hands gripped the bed sheets. "What do you want from me?" That's the wrong question. The right question is, what are you willing to do to earn what you want from me? She reached into her designer purse and pulled out a legal document. The papers were thick, official-looking, bound with a black clip. "I've had my lawyers draw up a contract. If you want me to consider donating my kidney, you'll agree to my terms." Blake's business instincts kicked in despite his weakened state. "What kind of terms?" 6 months of intensive therapy. Public sessions. Recorded. You'll face every woman whose life you've damaged, every dream you've crushed, every promise you've broken. Her voice was steady, professional. "You'll prove to me and to the world that you've learned to value what actually matters." Public therapy? Blake's voice cracked. "My shareholders, my competitors, will see exactly who you really are. The question is, are you more afraid of that or of dying?" She placed the contract on his bedside table. The weight of those papers seemed to press down on his chest heavier than his failing kidneys. "You want me to destroy my reputation, my company. I want you to discover whether you have anything underneath that reputation worth saving." Ariel's eyes were steady, unblinking. "You took 10 years of my life, Blake. You made me question my worth, my desirability, my right to exist in your world. Now I'm offering you the chance to find out if you're worth the kidney you're asking for." Blake stared at the contract, his mind racing through calculations. Stock prices, board reactions, media coverage. Then he looked at Ariel, Dr. Brooks, and saw something in her expression that stopped his business mind cold. She wasn't negotiating. She was offering him redemption with a price tag attached. His hand shook as he reached for the pen, but not from illness, from the terrifying realization that she might be offering him something more valuable than life. The chance to deserve it. "Where do I sign?" The most powerful man in Austin was about to learn that the hardest person to face in therapy isn't yourself. It's the woman whose heart you shattered watching you try to rebuild your soul. Blake's first therapy session was scheduled for Thursday at 2 p.m. He'd flown his private jet to Atlanta, booked the presidential suite at the Ritz-Carlton, and arrived at Ariel's practice building 30 minutes early. Old habits died hard. He still believed preparation and expensive suits could control any situation. Her office felt like a sanctuary built for healing. Soft lighting cast warm shadows across earth-toned furniture. Plants thrived in every corner, the kind of space where broken people learn to breathe again. Blake sat on the cream-colored couch, feeling like an intruder in a temple. "Before we begin," Ariel said, settling in her chair with a legal pad and pen, "I need you to understand something. In this room, you're not a CEO, you're not a billionaire. You're just Blake, a man trying to figure out why he hurts people he claims to love." Blake shifted uncomfortably. "I never claimed to be perfect." "No, but you acted like other people's feelings were less important than your goals." She clicked her pen. "Tell me about the night you decided to leave me. We've been divorced for 10 years. Why does that matter now?" "Because patterns repeat until we understand them. You didn't just leave me, Blake. You've left everyone who ever mattered to you. Your parents, your college friends, business partners who trusted you." Her voice remained professionally calm. "I want to understand why you run when people need you most." Blake's throat felt tight. "Business is different than personal relationships. Is it? You built Morrison Tech by convincing investors to trust you. Then you bought them out the moment their input became inconvenient. Sound familiar?" The comparison stung because it was accurate. Blake had a pattern of drawing people close when he needed them, then pushing them away when they expected emotional reciprocity. "The night I decided to leave," he said slowly, "you were crying in our bedroom. You've been crying for weeks after we lost the baby. Say it properly. After the miscarriage." The word felt like swallowing glass. "You wanted to try again immediately. You wanted to go to grief counseling together. You wanted me to take time off work to heal with you. And I couldn't handle it. Your pain, your needs, your constant reminder of what we'd lost." Blake's hands clenched into fists. "Every time I looked at you, I saw failure. My failure to protect you, to protect our child, to be the husband you deserved." Ariel made a note. "So you left me to deal with the grief alone. I thought it would be easier for both of us." "Easier for you," she corrected. "You left because facing pain was harder than running away." Blake felt something crack inside his chest. Not physical pain, something deeper. The first hairline fracture in walls he'd spent decades building. The session timer chimed softly. 50 minutes had passed like 5. "Same time next week," Ariel said, closing her legal pad. "And Blake? Next session, we're going to talk about the other women." As the session ended, she made a note in his file that made his blood freeze. "Patient shows signs of genuine remorse, but lacks understanding of systematic harm caused. Recommendation: increase intensity." He was about to learn that her mercy came with thorns. His empire started cracking the moment he admitted the truth. Not because of illness, but because honesty has a way of exposing every lie you've built your life on. The Forbes article hit the internet at 6 a.m. sharp. Tech billionaire's life depends on ex-wife's forgiveness. The photograph showed Blake leaving Ariel's Atlanta office, his usually perfect composure replaced by something that looked suspiciously like vulnerability. Blake's phone exploded with calls. David fielded frantic board members, concerned investors, and reporters smelling blood in the water. Morrison Tech's stock dropped 12% in pre-market trading. "Sir, the board wants an emergency meeting," David said, his tablet overflowing with urgent messages. "Shareholders are asking questions about succession planning, about your fitness to lead the company." Blake sat in his hotel suite staring at the city skyline. Atlanta looked different from 30 floors up, smaller somehow, more manageable. Not like the overwhelming force it felt like when he was sitting across from Ariel. His phone buzzed. A text from Madison. "Babe, people are saying you're dying and your ex might not save you. This is like really bad for my image. Maybe we should take a break until this blows over." Blake deleted the message without responding. The contrast was becoming impossible to ignore. While Madison worried about her Instagram followers, Ariel was forcing him to confront truths he'd spent years avoiding. The second therapy session was worse than the first. "Tell me about Sarah Martinez," Ariel said, consulting her notes. Blake's stomach dropped. "How do you know about Sarah?" "I've been busy. Turns out there's a pattern. You meet ambitious women, promise them the world, then discard them when they become inconvenient. She looked up from her legal pad. Sarah was your marketing director, 26 years old. You had an affair with her while we were separated. We were getting divorced anyway. She got pregnant. The words hit Blake like a physical blow. He'd pushed that memory so deep he'd almost convinced himself it never happened. She miscarried too, Ariel continued, her voice clinical but her eyes blazing. And just like with me, you blamed her. Told her the stress of hiding the relationship probably caused it. Then you fired her. Blake felt the hotel room spinning. That's not. You didn't what? Destroy another woman the exact same way you destroyed me. Ariel leaned forward. There's also Jessica Chun, your former business partner, and Amanda Rodriguez, your assistant before David. Should I continue? The weight of his choices crashed down like a building collapse. Pattern after pattern, woman after woman. The same story played out with different faces. I don't remember being like that, Blake whispered. Of course you don't. Because in your version of events, you're always the victim. Always justified. Always just trying to focus on business. Ariel's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the pain underneath. But I remember Blake, and now so do they. What do you mean? Next week's session isn't private. Sarah, Jessica, and Amanda will be joining us. The room felt airless. His heart monitor would have been screaming if he'd been wearing one. Group therapy. Ariel smiled with the dangerous grace of a predator. Time to face your victims. The day he finally cried wasn't the day he admitted his wrongs. It was the day he understood what those wrongs had cost her. The conference room at Ariel's practice had been rearranged for group therapy. 5 chairs arranged in a circle, like some twisted version of a support group. Blake sat across from 3 women whose lives he'd damaged in pursuit of his dreams. Sarah Martinez looked exactly as he remembered. Sharp intelligence behind dark eyes, professional composure masking old wounds. Jessica Chun had started her own tech company after he'd forced her out of Morrison Tech. Amanda Rodriguez was now a successful executive assistant at a rival firm. Before we begin, Ariel said, taking her therapist's chair, I want to establish ground rules. Everyone speaks their truth. No interruptions, no justifications. Just listening. Blake's hands were sweating. In boardrooms, he commanded attention, controlled narratives, dominated conversations. Here, he was just another patient in the circle. Sarah, would you like to start? Sarah's voice was steady, professional. I was 26 when Blake hired me. Brilliant career ahead of me, full of ideas about changing the tech industry. She looked directly at Blake. You made me feel special. Chosen. But my ideas mattered. Blake remembered those late-night strategy sessions, the way Sarah's face lit up when he praised her marketing concepts. Then you seduced me, Sarah continued. Convinced me that what we had was real, that you were leaving your wife anyway. I believed you were different from other powerful men who use their positions for sex. I never used my position, Blake started. No interruptions, Ariel reminded him firmly. Sarah's composure cracked slightly. When I got pregnant, you panicked. Suddenly, I wasn't brilliant anymore. I was a problem to solve. You convinced me the stress of our secret relationship caused the miscarriage. Made me feel guilty for wanting to mourn our lost baby. Blake felt something twist in his chest. Their baby. He'd never thought of it that way. Jessica spoke next. I founded Morrison Tech with you. Equal partners, or so I thought, until you decided my 50% ownership was too generous. You used my divorce as leverage, bought me out when I was emotionally vulnerable. Then Amanda, you promoted me to assistant because I was good at anticipating your needs. But you expected me to lie for you, cover for your affairs, clean up your messes. When I refused to lie to your wife about Sarah, you fired me. The room fell silent except for the soft sound of someone crying. Blake realized with shock that it was him. Tears he'd held back for years were falling freely. I never meant. He began, then stopped. What could he say? That he hadn't meant to hurt them? That his intentions were good? Every excuse felt hollow. Tell us what you're feeling right now, Ariel said gently. Ashamed, Blake whispered. "Seeing all of you together, hearing your stories. I destroyed so many lives for what? Money? Success? Things that don't matter when you're dying alone." Rain streaked the office windows as his confession poured out. 10 years of buried guilt flooding the space between them like a dam finally breaking. For the first time in his adult life, Blake Morrison understood the true cost of his ambition. Professional boundaries exist for a reason, but the heart doesn't read ethics manuals, especially when it remembers what love felt like before it learned to fear. The group session had ended 2 hours ago, but Blake remained in Ariel's office. The other women had left with tentative forgiveness and firm boundaries. Sarah agreed to consider a written apology. Jessica wanted nothing but acknowledgement of her contribution to Morrison Tech's success. Amanda just wanted him to understand the position he'd put her in. Now Blake sat alone with Ariel as Atlanta's skyline glittered beyond the windows like scattered promises. The space between them crackled with electricity that 10 years and professional distance couldn't contain. "That was harder than I expected," Blake admitted, his voice hoarse from crying. Facing the truth usually is. Ariel had loosened her professional posture. Her shoes kicked off under her desk, her blazer draped over her chair. "How do you feel?" "Empty, but not in a bad way. Like I've been carrying something heavy for years and finally put it down." He looked at her directly. "Thank you for making me do this. I didn't make you do anything. You chose to face them, because you gave me a reason to." Blake stood and moved to the window where she'd stood earlier. "Ariel, can I ask you something personal? We're well past professional boundaries at this point. Why didn't you remarry? In 10 years, you never found someone worthy of you." Ariel was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. When she spoke, her voice was softer than her therapist's tone. "Because I spent 10 years learning to love myself. Learning that my worth doesn't depend on someone else's ability to see it." She joined him at the window, close enough that he could smell her perfume. "I dated, had relationships, but I never met anyone who made me want to risk that kind of vulnerability again. Until now." The question hung between them like a bridge neither was sure they should cross. "Blake," she started, then stopped. "I know this is complicated. I know I have no right to feel what I'm feeling." He turned toward her, their faces inches apart. "But sitting in that circle today, listening to those women, I realized something. I didn't just lose you. I lost the only person who ever loved me for who I was underneath all the success." "Who you were," Ariel repeated. Past tense. "Who I could be again. With help. With time. With someone who believes I'm worth saving." The air between them felt charged with possibility and danger. Professional ethics warred with human attraction. 10 years of hurt battled against undeniable chemistry. "This is exactly how it started before," Ariel whispered. "You in crisis, me wanting to help. Both of us confusing rescue with love. Is that what this is?" Before she could answer, Blake reached up and touched her face. She didn't pull away. Her skin was soft, familiar, like muscle memory his fingers had never forgotten. "Show me the difference," he said quietly. As his lips found hers, 10 years of carefully constructed walls crumbled, but the sound of her phone ringing cut through their reunion like a surgeon's blade. The call would change everything. Just when healing seemed possible, the past refused to stay buried. And some secrets are too big to overcome with therapy sessions and good intentions. Ariel answered her phone on the 4th ring, breathless from Blake's kiss. "Dr. Brooks." "Doctor, this is Detective Martinez with Atlanta PD. We need to speak with you about a former patient, Rachel Thompson." Blake watched Ariel's face change from flushed intimacy to professional concern in seconds. She stepped away from him, putting distance between them that felt like miles. "I can't discuss patient information without proper authorization," Ariel said carefully. "Ma'am, Rachel Thompson is dead. Suicide. She left a note mentioning your sessions together. We're not looking for confidential information. We just need to verify some timeline details." Blake saw Ariel's hand tremble as she gripped the phone. "I'll need to call you back after I consult with my legal counsel." She hung up and sank in her chair, the color drained from her face. "Ariel, what's wrong?" "A former patient killed herself." Ariel's voice broke. She was dealing with trauma from an abusive relationship with a powerful businessman, someone who promised her everything, then destroyed her when she became inconvenient. Blake felt ice form in his stomach. Someone like me? Someone exactly like you. Ariel looked up at him with eyes full of pain. Rachel was brilliant, ambitious, 24 years old. She believed this man would leave his wife for her. When she got pregnant, he convinced her to terminate it, then fired her and spread rumors that she was unstable. Ariel, she came to me broken, Blake, completely shattered. She tried to kill herself twice before finding my practice. I worked with her for 2 years, helping her rebuild her sense of worth, her trust in her own judgment. Tears started falling down Ariel's cheeks. She was getting better. She was dating someone healthy, considering going back to school. Blake knelt beside her chair. This isn't your fault, isn't it? Because 3 weeks ago, Rachel saw the Forbes article about you and me. She saw me giving a second chance to a man who hurt women exactly the way her abuser hurt her. Ariel's voice was bitter with self-recrimination. She called and asked how I could help someone like you when I'd spent years telling her that men like you don't change. The weight of unintended consequences crashed down on Blake. His pursuit of redemption had inadvertently harmed someone else, someone who needed to believe that women like Ariel didn't forgive men like him. What did you tell her? I told her that everyone deserves a chance to change. That forgiveness is about our own healing, not about excusing someone else's behavior. Ariel wiped her eyes. Apparently, she interpreted that as me saying her trauma didn't matter. That powerful men always get second chances while their victims get nothing. Blake felt the room spinning again. What do you need me to do? You need to leave, Ariel said quietly. This was a mistake. All of it. The therapy, the kiss, believing that you could actually change. Don't let one tragedy? Ariel stood up, her professional composure returning like armor. Blake, you're the tragedy. You're the pattern that keeps repeating, the reason women like Rachel lose hope. The truth hit him like a physical blow. Sometimes the person you're trying to save isn't worth saving. Sometimes the person you're trying to save isn't worth saving. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let them face the consequences of who they've chosen to be. The press conference was scheduled for 10 a.m. at the Atlanta Marriott. Ariel had called it herself, against the advice of her lawyer, her business partner, and every instinct that told her to stay quiet and let the Rachel Thompson situation fade away. Blake sat in his hotel room, watching the live stream on his laptop. His hands shook, not from kidney failure, but from the certainty that everything was about to end. Ariel walked to the podium wearing a black power suit that made her look like a judge delivering a verdict. Camera flashes exploded as reporters leaned forward, hungry for scandal. 2 weeks ago, I agreed to consider donating a kidney to my ex-husband, Blake Morrison. I made this decision hoping that people can change, that accountability leads to growth, that forgiveness serves healing. Her voice was steady, professional. I was wrong. Blake's laptop screen seemed to blur as his worst fears materialized. Yesterday, a young woman named Rachel Thompson took her own life. Rachel was my patient, a survivor of emotional abuse by a powerful businessman who used his position to manipulate and discard her. Ariel's composure cracked slightly. Rachel saw my decision to help Mr. Morrison as a betrayal of everything we'd worked toward in her healing journey. The reporters scribbled frantically. Blake could already see the headlines. Doctor abandons dying ex-husband after patient suicide. I want to be clear about something, Ariel continued, her voice growing stronger. Rachel's death is not Mr. Morrison's fault, but her despair, her belief that powerful men always escape consequences while their victims suffer alone. That pattern is exactly what men like my ex-husband create. Blake felt his world collapsing. Not just his hope for the kidney, but something deeper. The possibility that he could actually change, that redemption was real, that love could survive the worst kind of betrayal. Some people deserve second chances. Others deserve consequences. After extensive therapy sessions with Mr. Morrison, after seeing him face several women he's harmed, I've made my decision. Ariel looked directly into the main camera, as if she could see through the lens to Blake's hotel room. I will not be donating my kidney. The press room erupted in questions, but Ariel held up her hand for silence. Mr. Morrison has shown genuine remorse. He's cried real tears, admitted real guilt, faced real consequences for his actions. But remorse isn't the same as change. Tears aren't the same as transformation. And my kidney, my life force, is not the prize he gets for performing accountability. Blake closed his laptop. The decision was made. Justice served. Pattern broken. His phone buzzed with a text from David. Sir, stock is crashing. Board wants emergency meeting. What are your instructions? Blake stared at his phone for a long moment, then typed back, tell them I'm busy learning what life feels like without rescue. As security escorted him from the press conference building 30 minutes later, his final words echoed in the lobby. I love you, Ariel. That was never the lie. Her response would determine whether love was enough to bridge the chasm of betrayal, or if some wounds never heal. Love and justice don't always align, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone learn what life feels like without your rescue. Blake's health declined rapidly after the press conference. Without hope of Ariel's kidney, his medical team focused on making him comfortable. The experimental treatments weren't working. His skin had taken on a yellowish tint. His energy came in shorter and shorter bursts. Madison had officially broken up with him via Instagram story, complete with crying selfies and captions about toxic masculinity and learning to love herself first. The irony wasn't lost on Blake. She was using his downfall to build her personal brand. But it was the silence from Ariel that hurt most. No calls, no visits, no acknowledgement that he existed at all. 3 days after the press conference, Sarah Martinez showed up at his hospital room. I heard you were dying, she said, settling into the visitor's chair. Apparently so. Blake tried to sit up straighter. Sarah, I owe you. You don't owe me anything. I came to tell you something. She crossed her legs, professional as always. I hated you for years. Blamed you for destroying my career, my self-worth, my ability to trust my own judgment. Blake waited, expecting more anger. But watching you in that therapy session, seeing you actually listen to how you'd hurt us, that was the first time I felt like my pain mattered to you. Sarah's voice softened. I still think you're selfish. I still think you use people. But I also think you're trying to change. And that's more than most men in your position would do. Does that mean you forgive me? It means I'm not carrying hatred for you anymore. There's a difference. Sarah stood to leave. Blake, can I ask you something? Of course. If Ariel had agreed to give you the kidney, would you have continued therapy? Would you have kept working on yourself? Or would you have gone back to business as usual once you were healthy? Blake opened his mouth to say yes automatically, then stopped. Sarah deserved honesty. I don't know, he admitted. I hope I would have. But honestly, I might have convinced myself that surviving was proof I'd changed enough. Sarah nodded. That's why she said no. Not because she doesn't care about you, but because she cares too much to enable you. After Sarah left, Blake stared at the ceiling for hours. Was Ariel right? Was his pursuit of her kidney just another form of manipulation? Using her emotions and their history to get what he needed? His phone rang. Dr. Chen's voice was carefully neutral. Mr. Morrison, I have news. We've found another potential donor. A car accident victim in Dallas. Their family has agreed to donation, and initial tests show compatibility. Blake felt a surge of hope, followed immediately by something unexpected. Guilt. Someone had died for him to live. A family was grieving so he could get a second chance. Doctor, can I ask you something? If I get this kidney, if I survive, am I obligated to become a better person? That's not a medical question, Mr. Morrison. No, Blake said quietly. I guess it's not. Sometimes miracles don't look like rescue. They look like the universe finally providing another option when you've made peace with letting go. The surgery took 8 hours. Blake woke up in the ICU with tubes down his throat and machines beeping a steady rhythm of hope. The kidney was working. His body was accepting the gift. He was going to live. Dr. Chun checked his chart with professional satisfaction. The transplant was successful, Mr. Morrison. Your new kidney is functioning perfectly. The donor was a 22-year-old college student named Marcus Williams. His family wanted you to know that he was studying to be a teacher. Blake closed his eyes. Marcus Williams, a name he would carry for the rest of his life. A young man whose death had purchased Blake's survival. I want to write to his family, Blake whispered through the breathing tube. That can be arranged once you're stronger. 3 weeks into recovery, Blake was strong enough to sit in a chair by the hospital window. Austin spread out below him like a city of second chances. His company's stock had stabilized. The board had voted to keep him as CEO with the understanding that he would step back from day-to-day operations. But none of that mattered compared to the envelope on his bedside table. Ariel's handwriting on expensive stationery. Inside, a single sheet of paper. I heard about your surgery. I'm glad you're alive. I hope you make Marcus Williams proud. Dr. Brooks. No signature. No words. Just acknowledgement that he existed. Blake folded the note carefully and put it in his wallet next to a photo of Marcus Williams that the family had sent. A smiling young man with his whole life ahead of him, now reduced to the organ that kept Blake breathing. 2 months later, Blake was strong enough to travel. His first trip wasn't to a board meeting or investor conference. It was to a modest house in East Dallas where Marcus Williams' mother, Gloria, answered the door with tired eyes and careful politeness. Mrs. Williams, I'm Blake Morrison. I received your son's kidney. Gloria looked him up and down, taking in his expensive clothes and nervous energy. You're the billionaire who was in the news. The one whose ex-wife wouldn't help him. Yes, ma'am. Marcus would have helped you anyway, she said quietly. He was like that, always trying to save people, even when they didn't deserve it. The words hit Blake harder than any therapy session. This woman had lost her son, and she was more concerned about whether Blake deserved the gift than whether he could afford to repay it. Mrs. Williams, I want to establish a scholarship fund in Marcus's name for students who want to become teachers but can't afford school. That's nice, she said without enthusiasm. But money won't bring my boy back. No, ma'am. But maybe it can help other young people live the life Marcus wanted to live. For the first time, Gloria Williams smiled. Marcus would like that. He always said education was the only thing that really changed people. Blake felt something shift in his chest. Not gratitude for surviving, but responsibility for living well. The man who walked back into her life wasn't the one who'd left, but the question remained whether change could bridge the canyon that betrayal had carved between them. 6 months after his transplant, Blake Morrison stood outside Ariel's practice building in Atlanta. He looked different, thinner from the surgery, quieter in his expensive clothes, carrying himself like a man who'd learned the weight of other people's sacrifices. He didn't go inside. Instead, he waited across the street until her last patient left, then watched her lock up for the evening. She looked exactly the same, confident, beautiful, completely in control of her world. She saw him before she reached her car. Blake. Her voice was neutral, professional. How are you feeling? Alive. Thanks to a 22-year-old named Marcus Williams who died in a car accident. Blake stayed on his side of the street. I didn't come to ask you for anything, Ariel. I came to give you something back. He held up an envelope. Not a check, something smaller, more personal. I'm not interested in your money, she said. It's not money. It's an apology. A real one. The kind you write when you finally understand what you've done wrong. Ariel hesitated, then crossed the street. She took the envelope but didn't open it. I also came to tell you that you were right, Blake continued. If you'd given me your kidney, I probably would have convinced myself that surviving meant I'd changed enough. I would have gone back to my old life with a clear conscience and a functioning kidney. And now I'm trying to figure out how to honor the gift I received. Marcus Williams was going to be a teacher. He wanted to help kids in underprivileged communities get better educations. Blake's voice was steady, no longer carrying the desperate edge of a man who needed something. I've started a foundation in his name, not as publicity or tax write-off, but because I owe him a debt I can never repay. Ariel studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or performance. She'd become expert at spotting fake remorse. That's good, Blake. I'm glad you're using your second chance well. I'm also in therapy. Real therapy, not the public sessions designed to win you back. Individual counseling with a therapist who doesn't care about my feelings or my company stock price. What does your therapist say about you being here? Blake smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him since their divorce. She says I'm still trying to control outcomes instead of focusing on my own growth. She's probably right. She is right. Will you read the letter? Maybe. Blake nodded and started to walk away, then turned back. Ariel, thank you for not saving me. I know that sounds crazy, but forcing me to face the consequences of my choices, that was the most loving thing you could have done. She watched him disappear around the corner before opening the envelope. Inside, 3 words that changed everything. I understand now. Under that, an address and a simple invitation. The Marcus Williams Center opens next month. You're welcome to visit. 10 years after he walked away from their marriage, they stood together again. Not as husband and wife, but as 2 people who'd learned that love isn't about possession, it's about liberation. The Marcus Williams Center for Educational Excellence occupied 3 floors of a renovated building in East Dallas. Children's laughter echoed through hallways lined with photos of local teachers and college-bound students. The smell of fresh paint and new books filled the air like possibility itself. Ariel walked through the tutoring rooms and computer labs, impressed despite herself. This wasn't a vanity project or tax shelter. This was serious, sustainable, designed to last generations. The scholarship program has funded 47 students so far, Blake said, following her through the main classroom. We focus on first-generation college students who want to become teachers. It's impressive, Ariel admitted. How much of your wealth did you commit to this? 80%, keeping enough to live comfortably, but not enough to insulate myself from consequences anymore. Ariel stopped walking. 80%. Marcus Williams died so I could live. The least I can do is make sure his dreams don't die with him. They stood in the main hallway, surrounded by photos of scholarship recipients and thank you letters from families. The weight of genuine change was visible in every detail. Blake, can I ask you something personal? After everything we've been through, ask me anything. Are you happy? Really happy? Not performing happiness for my benefit or anyone else's. Blake considered the question seriously. I'm not happy the way I used to think about happiness. Constant pleasure, endless acquisition, people telling me how amazing I am. But I'm satisfied in a way I never was before. Like I'm finally living in alignment with something bigger than my own desires. That's called purpose, Ariel said softly. Is that what this feeling is? They walked outside to a small garden where a bronze plaque honored Marcus Williams. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the memorial, and Ariel felt something she hadn't expected. Peace. I read your letter, she said, and you finally apologized without asking for anything in return. That's growth. Blake sat on a bench facing the memorial. I've thought about calling you 100 times over the past 6 months. Wanted to tell you about the foundation, about therapy, about how different everything feels now. But you didn't call, because I finally learned the difference between wanting to share good news and needing validation. He looked at her directly. I don't need you to approve of my changes for them to be real. Ariel sat beside him, careful to maintain distance, but no longer hostile. So what happens now? She asked. Now we get to choose. We could be strangers who share a complicated history, or we can be friends who've learned something valuable from our mistakes. Blake's voice was calm, free from the desperate undertone that used to characterize their conversations. Either way, I'll be fine, and I think you will be too. The sun set over Dallas as they sat in comfortable silence. 2 people who'd finally learned that the strongest love isn't about rescue, it's about recognition. If this story made you think about forgiveness, accountability, and second chances, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories about real transformation and genuine growth. Tell me in the comments. Do you believe people can truly change, or are some patterns too deep to break? And remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone face the consequences of their choices.